I'm sure. Probably just.
Yeah, well, no,
City Hall. It's gotta be here.
It's gotta be where I'm getting interviewed.
Yeah, Business Center. No, it's actually called that. So is Tom going to be here tonight?
I haven't heard either way. Usually I think he would let me know, so he may just be running a bit late.
Jake's out in Santa today. Bringing pictures. If you have an old picture, you get your old picture back.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep, I have nothing else. Oh, well, it depends. Yeah, I guess it is every two, isn't it?
The group pictures.
Every-
Everything have a change.
Yeah,
But this is the first time I've had a change in the.
ditto. I had another one, but I didn't like it, so they left my original. I just don't like having them taken. Okay, we'll now call to order our study session for the West Valley City Council this Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. And it is 4:30. We're in the multipurpose room of West Valley City Hall. We'll now call the meeting to order and the roll call. Mr. Hune is missing. He is not, he's excused for tonight. I should put it that way, sorry. And Mr. Fitzsimonu and Ms. Christensen are on Zoom. And then if Mr. Hune joins us, we'll let you know. We have our meeting minutes from April 12th, 2022. Is there any discussion or emotion on those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from April 12th.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those pass. We now have our regular agenda items for tonight. Was there any major changes?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so Ms. Cottle and I were just speaking about if we have a large turnout for the overpressure zone, that if it looks like there's a big crowd, we'll probably play the video and then take public comment. Does anybody have an objection to that? Okay. We will do that as planned. Was there any other comments or questions on tonight's agenda? It was a pretty easy one. Okay. We now have our proclamation declaring the 29th of April, 2022 as Arbor Day in West Valley City. Is there anyone that would like to read that, or do we need to read it? What's your pleasure?
I think you need to read it.
Okay. That works for me. If nobody's volunteering, we'll just state it and not read it. We'll move on to our resolutions. We have resolution 22-73, and we'll turn the time over to Ms. Cottle.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's been a little while since we issued bonds. We fortunately have a great financial advisor to the city who's long-term with us and understands the needs of the city and also kind of the parameters of the way we like to operate here. This, as you'll recall, is for the court building next door. And also you'll recall much of the time when we do these types of bonds, we do them through the Municipal Building Authority for the purpose of the building being the asset that drives that as well. So there's a rhyme for that reason as well that both Jim and the folks from Lewis Young tonight with us can discuss if you have questions. But I'd invite Jim up to just talk about how we proceed with these bonds and answer any questions. And then we also do have our friends from Lewis Young here, and Jim can introduce them as well.
Thank you. I guess we stand behind the podium now, don't we? Great. As Ms. Cottle mentioned, I'm Jim Welch, the finance director for the city. And this is a bond issue for the purpose of obtaining additional funds for the build out and construction of the courts building, which, as you know, we've been in negotiations for a very long time. And as a matter of fact, today we actually closed on the purchase of that building. So we now own the building. And there's additional funding that we're seeking to be able to build that out. So it's functional court and office building for those type of services. We also have with us Mr. Nate Robertson of the Lewis Young Robertson and Birmingham, representing their firm this evening. They are longtime partners of the city, and they've done a great job with us for a number of years. They have a responsibility to look out for the interests of the city. Sometimes they tell us things that we don't want to hear, and most of the time they tell us things that we do want to hear. But we appreciate their candid answers and their honesty and all the benefit that they brought to the city, which has been a lot. So this particular bond issue, there are two parts of it. The first one is an action by the city council, and that is the authorization of the city council to authorize the building authority to issue bonds and make an addendum, that's a funny word, make an addendum to their existing lease agreement. So the building authority is created for the purpose of building buildings and creating financing, taking care of the financial aspects of acquiring property. And then the city authorizes them to do that. They lease the building back until the building is actually paid for, at which time the title reverts to the city. So that's the purpose of the building authority, facilitates the purchase and building of these type of buildings. They also, you'll execute a lease with them. That's that second part of it with the building authority. And then on the building authority side is the building authority will issue bonds for the purpose of this construction. So that's pretty much it. The purchase price of the building, if you'll remember, was $3.9 million. It's payable in 2 installments. We paid the first one today and had that closing. So I know Jake's pretty excited to get moving on that building. And then the rest of it will be paid in December, and that's only the acquisition cost. And then the build out will occur there forward. There's a couple of things that I probably should mention. The market has been pretty fickle lately. There's been an awful lot of volatility in the market. Rates have been skyrocketing, particularly in the bond market. We felt like it was very important to get this before you as quickly as possible so that we could make a decision either to move quickly on it and take advantage of rates before they continue to get a little bit higher, or else we even have the option of delaying and seeing if we can wait out this kind of psychosis in the markets going on right now, if it makes sense. And that'll be a management decision based on the information with our municipal advisors and the information they give us. So there's quite a bit of flexibility there. This is also the adoption of what's called a super parameters resolution, which means it's really good. That was a dumb finance joke.
That was a finance joke.
Anyway, it means that this particular resolution covers all aspects of this bond sale, and that should the bonds go to market at the decision of a committee that is outlined here. It's usually the city manager, the finance director, and the mayor, I believe. Any two of those can make this decision. That bond sale will occur without further need to bring that before the city council. So there is some flexibility in there. We're trying to make the best decisions we can, given the uncertainty of the market, which, if we had a crystal ball, we'd certainly use it, but we'll use our best judgment and we'll engage our best professionals in deciding what we can do to make this work for us. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if Mr. Robertson, if you had any questions for him, I know he'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, I'll turn it to the council. Any questions?
So on March 15th, we talked about this, and it was stated that the bond would be 20 years and 2.5%. Are we way off of that now?
That was certainly for discussion purposes, where the rates are definitely way off right now. Since the 1st of April, rates have gone up at least 0.5%, 50 basis points. Since the 1st of the year, we've seen about 150 basis points. Basis points is 0.1%. And that today was a bad day in the market that way too. We also saw a 10 basis point increase in today's market. The term of those bonds, there is some flexibility in those. If these were 20-year bonds, they would actually expire before the original bonds were issued. The original bonds were issued to expire in 2044. So we've actually got 22 years left. So we could go anywhere from a shorter term to a little bit longer term. Actually, the authorization allows up to 30 years. I don't know if it's usually not the best way to go with these, given rates and the propensity to pay things off the quicker we can. So yeah, those discussion points, that's exactly where they were, and the market has moved away from those.
A lifetime ago.
So are you saying you're attaching this to an existing bond?
No,
Because
there's,
you said it was a
oh,
44
I'm sorry.
year.
Yeah, let me not confuse you there. There are two bonds associated with this court building. Originally, when this was done in 2017 is when the deal started to be put together. The price for the building was being negotiated along with the costs of renovating that building and making it a functional court. Since that time, a lot of things have happened. The negotiation for the price of the building has occurred, and building costs, as you know, have skyrocketed. The additional money that we're bonding for here will be needed to actually build out those courts now, because there's not enough money in the initial bond to do that. So there will be two bonds in the building authority. The first ones will be the acquisition and part of the construction. The second one will allow us to finish up.
So you'll recall that first bond, ma'am, was a part of a larger city center bond. And that 5 million was set aside for the court and has just sat
In that
in holding
account.
until, yes. So that first bond issue was it encompassed other things in city center as well as RDA.
Yeah, it was actually the public safety building that we did for the police department. It was the parking structure. It was the courts. It was a number of things that were packaged together to get some economic benefit from issuing them all together rather than having separate issues.
Okay, so we've got the 5 million in that bond that we can put towards this, and then up to 6.5 in this new bond.
Correct. And the estimate on this right now is about $5.5 million. Those estimates are from Jake, and the contract that you've agreed, I think it was last week, went to council for the contractor to do the build out of the courts was about 5 million. And that 5.5 million should cover those costs plus the additional whatever it's FF&E or whatever else is going into that building. And then we always, when we do a bond issue, we give some leeway. They're up to 6.5. We're not going to be issuing 6.5. I can guarantee you that. But there's enough to cover the cost of issuance and whatever ancillary things might come up without us having to go back and redo the whole thing over again. Because this does require what's called a contestability period, where it will basically sit for 30 days and allow the public to examine it and bring comment should they desire to. So we don't want to have to start that over again with a whole new bond issue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Jim, I'm assuming it's I don't know, maybe in the future, maybe you give us an update, something before we vote, because this one, I think we did vote already, right? Not
on this one. No, you voted for
the one purchase.
For the purchase was done in 2017. Correct.
Yeah, the purchase of the building. I mean the
Yes. That was when that was authorized.
Yeah, I was assuming it's the rate low. You know, yeah, just give us an update or something. You know what I'm saying? Before we do something.
So how long is this resolution good for? I know we have another bond with a different board I'm on, that it can last up to a year without changing anything, reissuing it.
This
What about this?
this resolution was also built with that kind of flexibility. I consulted with bond counsel yesterday on that very question. They said up to a year.
Okay,
So I guess that's pretty common practice. So
yeah, just that way, if the ebb and flow, we can catch it when we need to.
yep, that flexibility will be good.
All right, any other questions?
Mayor, if I might add one other thing, Councilmember Hun asked a great question a couple of weeks ago about this project, and the answer I think is probably important today and didn't get brought out as fully, and that is that part of the interesting thing about building a court building is that the state controls a lot of our destiny with regards to what has to be there in the courtrooms. So as Councilmember Hun wisely asked about, you know, what are we talking about here from a level of construction perspective? Much of the efficiencies and engineering costs, what's it called when you do efficient engineering? can't bring the word up in my mind, have been done, and then the state sets the parameter. Thank you, value engineering. Then the state sets the parameter for what those courtrooms, we can't go below their standards. And so I just wanted to make sure that requirement was out there and out in the open, because Councilmember Hunn had asked that really good and wise question, and that parameter on that side of things really holds us to a particular standard. And then the value engineering has been done on all the rest that we do control. So I want to make sure the council, we have that on the record, and the council heard that from me as well.
And I don't want to, beat a dead horse on this one too, but since COVID, the standards have changed significantly, and the need for separation, the need for technology. We're dealing with a completely different world than we first started this project.
Good. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. So we'll go to resolution 22-74. Do you want to introduce her, or should I just turn it over to Ms.
Nancy
Day?
can come on right on that. Okay, it's already up there.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. So this resolution is something that you're familiar with. You had a chance to talk about this a couple months ago on the purchase of this property from Raymond Crane and his wife that own this parcel. So wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of exactly where it's at. So you can see on the display behind me here to the left, which would be west, is Westview Park. So that's 6,000 West, 4,100 South. So if you look, the property itself is boxed in yellow, and it's 1.3 acres. Directly south of that is where the Maverick's at. That's not too old. So you can kind of get your dimensions. To the north of that, you can kind of see a little faint green line. It kind of goes off the picture. That's where the Utah Salt Lake Canal is at. And so we've got a trail system through there that the county, Salt Lake County, is actually going to be giving more funds, as you recall, when I presented last week, to the more development there, which connects to the right of all this property to Mountain View Corridor Trail System. So the Mountain View Corridor is just to the east of this. The property to the east of this is actually like a sports field that UDOT gave to the city. So it's just grass right now, and it's kind of been on its own, sitting out there. And about 2 years ago, we purchased the Mitchell property, which is to the north, that butts right up against the trail system. So it's just adjacent to that. That home is no longer there. It's been demolished. So this resolution is just to confirm and ask for approval for the purchase of this property. And that will allow us to extend Westview Park even more and really complete the picture and allow easier use of the property that we received from UDOT as well, and connect all the pieces. So are there any questions?
Any questions for Nancy?
What are the plans for this property and the one to the north?
Okay, so right now we have a grant application and we haven't heard if we've received it yet for the property that's right up against and adjacent to the trail, which would actually be more of an adult and teenager. Kids could use it too, like a ninja course, which would be very popular, not only for the area, but for users of the trail as well. It would be a very nice stopping point. We anticipate, we don't know for sure, we haven't met with any landscape architect people yet, but we anticipate needing a little bit more parking. We certainly don't want to take all of it for parking, but we anticipate needing a little bit more. And then just really look at some, fun design features that we can put in there. And like I said, certainly connect the sport field to the east and see what we can do with that. So I would certainly bring our ideas to you as we get a little bit closer to that. Once we get to that step, development will be a little bit out unless we're able to secure more grant dollars. But you're well aware of, the funding that we have for development. So we're out a little bit on that. But it'll be a very nice addition to Westview and for that community.
Great. Singh, do you have a question?
One other comment, Mayor. And I mentioned this on Rocky Ridge, just want to make sure that, and I've seen the signs that we're hiring and looking for people to help clean the parks. I just want to make sure we're not expanding beyond our capabilities to maintain these new parks that we're putting on. And I really recognize this is going to be a while before it's developed, but is our strategy to grow the maintenance and clean up and everything going at the same rate as we're expanding new parks in the city?
It is, and where we don't have it, the dollar set, one of the, some of the information that you'll get from me each year will be where we stand in acreage per employee and kind of what we need and how we need to grow that. You're absolutely right. Right now, the market's tough. It's really hard to find people. We're hoping that subsides a little bit, and we're looking at some different creative ways with our HR department to maybe help facilitate that a little bit more. We do have a caretaker currently there. And so some of the parks, we're still looking for more caretakers, but we would expand their role a little bit here. But on the maintenance side, there's several cost factors, right? There's the fertilizer, the water, just the general care. And then of course the employees is a big chunk of that. But yeah, we are constantly looking at ways that we can assess that need and maybe even make changes. You heard me talk last week a little bit about some of the technology that we're bringing in and that we're looking for to help with the number of hours that we have, not only because it's difficult to find employees, but also to just lower the cost of maintenance. So yeah, that's a very valid point. So.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
All right, we'll now turn to our consent agenda and have Mr. Johnson is on Zoom if we have any questions.
Yeah, ma'am,
Maybe.
this is a new run of the same we saw on 47th and otherwise. So I wanted down just to take a quick minute, and if it pleases the council, to just talk it through quickly. We'll see these in succession every week and we can get our arms around those. That's okay.
Okay, yep, I'll turn the time over to Mr. Johnson.
Okay, these are 5 more of these little pedestrian ramp acquisitions that we've been acquiring. This is for the 3100 South pavement overlay. So as you may recall, we're going to overlay 3100 South between 40th West and 4800 West, or no, excuse me, 5600 West this summer. It's actually currently out to bid. And when we overlay a road like this, we have to bring the ramps up to the new current ADA standards, which means they need a bit of a larger footprint. So we've seen many of these and we'll continue to see many more.
Did anybody have an issue with any of the items? Okay, thank you so much.
Anytime.
All right, we'll now move on to our communication items. And it's the CEP update. And I'll turn the time over to Ms. Peterson and she can take the time or turn it over to Mr. Bueller. And tag team it.
Well, I'll get started with a little bit of history. I only know there's not a single council member that was on the council when I was on, excuse me. Believe it or not, in the 90s, there were 4 women on the West Valley City Council. Now I don't see any. Glad you're still here, Karen.
Thank you.
And the staff people, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that were here when I was here. I was elected for 19 years in the 90s and early 2000s. So at that time, a lot of us realized in the community as a whole that we had some very poor outcomes in our schools for our kids. So I got tired of talking about it and organized a committee in 2002, organized an education committee. We had educators, religious leaders, parents, teachers, principals, all came to this meeting. And we did a lot of research, a lot of talking, meeting with different funders around the state. What is the best solution for our kids? It looks like our website is up there on your picture. It's probably more interesting than me, I'm sure. But I think it's important, and I understand that the two new council members asked for a presentation because you're not familiar with Community Education Partnership. So in 2004, we received our nonprofit 501c3 status from the IRS, which enabled us to write grants as a nonprofit corporation and to administer programs and have payroll systems. We had a formal CEP and a financial structure that we still have and has expanded considerably since then. So we moved on, and one day we actually were in this very room having our board meeting, and there was a lady sitting in that corner who I didn't recognize. And towards the middle of the meeting, I asked her to introduce herself and thanked her for coming. Well, it turns out she was the director of the grant programs for the Family Connections organization, which is kind of an arm of Workforce Services. And she says, after the meeting, I'd like to give you a grant. I've heard about all the good things that you're setting up. I'd like to give you a grant. Okay, we've got it. So that opened lots of doors and lots of problems and lots of challenges. But from then on, we grew substantially. And in your packet, there's a timeline of our funding. This is the blue and red one. Our first grant was awarded in 2003. That happened to be a earmark back in the good old days when the federal government, Congress had earmarks, and Senator Hatch was very gracious. We would go visit with him every year, and he awarded us funds for science programs beginning in 2003. And through 2010, we received through Senator Hatch $1.87 million. So he really got us rolling. Along with Workforce Services, we had grants from Workforce Services from 2009 and 2012 in the amount of $270,000. And we're just finishing up our Utah State Board of Education 21st Century Grants for a total of over $8 million over 20 years. And you can see the list of other entities that have awarded us grants. And they've all dried up. They don't even exist anymore. 21st Century grants are still being awarded, but they are nearly impossible. It takes literally a full-time staff of grant writers and researchers to write a 21st Century grant. So in consulting with my board and the ability I had as a project director and a grant writer and administrating all of these nonprofit business operations, as well as overseeing all of the programs we had, there was just no way that it could be done without hiring some big staff people. So they agreed that we would pursue other avenues of funding, which I'll get to in a few minutes. So over the past 20 years, the Community Education Partnership, or CEP, has received $11,634,457 from various grants and donations. And I'd like to introduce two board members who are here with us this afternoon. Our chair, Steve Bueller. You know Steve very well. Steve has been outstanding chair of our organization for about 10 years or more. I had it written down on I'm getting you an award certificate.
Oh, boy.
I have to research all the minutes for about 15 years to see when the year was it started.
Won't spend any money.
I won't. Sharon Sonnenreich is our elementary representative. She's principal of Silver Hills and was formerly principal of Hillside. So I've worked with her for several years. She's one of my heroes. Sharon is a former attorney turned principal. She is a mover and a shaker. She really straightens things out. So if you need anyone at your school, Sharon can give you some advice. where your kids go to school. And I don't know the names of these two gentlemen. I guess you're city council members, you're at the table,
Do you want me to introduce them?
if you would,
So Councilmember Will Whetstone
I will.
and Councilman Scott Harmon.
Scott, and what districts do you represent?
3.
3 and 2. You've got it easy. I did at large for 17 years. Well, congratulations on your new election. That's wonderful. So feel free to interrupt if you have any questions while I'm talking. Sometimes I think that I've covered this so many times for the rest of them, they're sick of it. Do you have any questions at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see on the timeline of this chart that how we went up to our peak. We had over $1 million annually in 2014 at payroll, monthly payroll of $80,000 in those days. It's really busy. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. But it was wonderful. And we were helping, as you can see on the next chart, we have helped 14, almost 15,000 students who participated 30 days or more in after-school programs. And for those who we helped, who attended more than that, we're up in the, I went through and added all that up. It's almost 30,000 kids. So for those who attend 30 days or more, that's pretty much the elementary kids. Junior high and high school kids don't have regular everyday programs. So they come maybe once or twice a week or 3 times a week to a math lab or to a library program. So the 30 days or more were the requirements for this teacher survey by the 21st century. That's why it says 30 days or more. We have tracked all of those years for 11 years, and our this year's survey goes out next month. So you can see on that chart on the bottom how consistent these results are. Double-digit results in all 10 categories for 20 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. And these are kids that needed help with their grades and their tests. They needed help with relationships. They needed help getting along with other students. And boy, these days, that's a real issue. And how much it impacted their attendance during the day and their attentiveness during the day really makes a big difference in their participation in class. So these surveys were completed by regular day teachers of after-school participants. So they had a whole entire year to observe the after-school kids and the non-after-school kids. And they could see what a difference it made for them to go to after school. And many times, most programs have a before-school component as well. We have another important component of community education partnership are our partners. We have had 40 partners over the past 20 years, 40 community partners. University of Utah, for 12 years, we've been partners in various departments. The School of Medicine has done hands-on science activities. KUED Family Reading Nights, Department of Pathology has done science workshops. College of Engineering has done science workshops. Salt Lake Community College, 8 years of partnership in this computer science department, health science department, and our computer science department. They have done 3-day summer camps where we've gone to computer companies, mostly in Orem, but the pandemic changed all that. Last year, we went to the butterfly exhibit. This year, May 27, they're taking us to the aquarium. We have 35 girls that they have purchased tickets for and chaperones and a bus. You can see as our website scrolls through the Bruin bus, they pick us up in their Bruin bus. and take us off to the aquarium this year. And the kids love it. We have, some of our schools have 90% free and reduced lunch. Kids who have never been out of their neighborhood. Kids who have no idea what it's like downtown, or an aquarium or a butterfly exhibit. So for many of these kids in our city, this is an opportunity they would never otherwise have. And the other thing that our after-school programs do is improve relationships with teachers. That's the number one response from the kids. What did you get out of after school? A better relationship with the teacher and my friends. And what does that end up resulting in? Better attendance in school, continuing on to complete 6th grade, going on to junior high and high school, and graduating. We have kids who've been in schools, after-school programs, all of their entire education life. And I really wanted to get a way to track that. The Grant School District won't do that. Their information is not shared. And 30 years ago, when I started working with Granite District, I realized it would be an uphill battle. And it has been. That's why we have Community Education Partnership, is because we have an invested interest in West Valley City kids. The district has been very good, though, in having a rent-free, cost-free agreement to operate our programs in their schools at no cost. So that was a big achievement to get that contract. Drum bus, you've seen that flashing around on our website. That's a really fun old school bus. It's been painted and converted to, all the benches were taken out, and the kids sit inside around the inside. If you could show that back again, our website. I don't think I can do that from here. The kids sit in benches around the inside. Here's the drum bus. And they have drums, and they're taught to sing and pound the drums in bully prevention songs. And one day I drove up, I was a little bit late. This bus was rocking back and forth. The kids just love it. They've been to your school a couple of times this year. So that is a great partnership. West Valley Community Cultural Celebration Center, we've been going there for field trips, art projects. They now even pay for our bus to get the kids there. That's been going on for at least 10 years. Susan Klinker is actually a new member of our board of directors. So the website, this is a Christmas project that was in Monroe. You saw the Bruin bus, there's the drum bus. Is there any way I can control this, or I just tell you?
You can, that mouse is up there. Will
Oh,
work.
okay.
Let's use that. Look at that. Out of your way.
Okay. This is Hunter Elementary just had a play last month, Wizard of Oz. That was all sponsored by CEP's part of they have an academic program, tutoring, and they had this component to improve their community relations and get people and families back into coming to school. The pandemic has been really hard on our schools and our programs. We had to reduce enrollment or attendance because social distancing. Schools were closed several times, resulted in fewer days of operation. So our website is also a tool for our coordinators and board members. Back to the homepage. So when our coordinators need any information on programs, reports, employment forms, anything like that, they go right to our website, and all of the reports, all the program forms, policies and procedures, time cards, anything they need is right here on the website. There are all kinds of resources. Here's a chart that shows it's just like the one you have here, only it's in a different format. The bar graph. Lots of resources, everything they need to run an operation is right there. And our board members go into the website and they can see everything that board members need, agendas, minutes. We've got our insurance policies here, program news, all those kinds of things that board members need. So this has been a real asset. Any questions? How much time do I have?
4 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll turn the time over then to Principal Sonnenreich. Just let me, one more quick thing, summarize the grants that we have going on right now. Our 21st Century Grant has carryover funds that end June 30. It'll be all over, which is tough after all of these years. 2009 was our first 21st Century Grant. Now 2022 will be the end. And I thought maybe the state would be concerned about that. I did get one little half of a sentence from the director that says, "I'm glad you're doing mini grants at West Valley City." So that brings us to the campaign that Steve and I have been working on for years to help the city realize how important it is to continue after school and before school programs for our kids in this city. And 2 years ago, the city council voted to fund $90,000 to the mini grant program, and this year it's our second year. So we also have some private partner contributions, some other small grants that go into that account. And our projects range from 5,000 to 20,000, depending on how many days a week they operate, whether it's partial year, full year, or summer. Projects, all of the projects consist of academic and enrichment components. Everyone has to write an application. And after 25 years of doing this, I picked the best components of every application and made it simple and concise. And they need to list their goals, their projected outcomes, how they're going to measure those outcomes. Then they write a report on it at the end of the year. Our elementary grantees for mini grants: Silver Hills, Hillside, Hunter, Academy Park, Farnsworth, Monroe, and Valley Junior all have mini grants this year. They also complete, in addition to their report, they complete teacher surveys every year. So when you have some free time and you need to get to sleep, read this report from the After School Alliance before you fall asleep. And it really has a good, this came out Tuesday, has a good summary of the importance of after-school programs, not just here, but all over the country. So I've asked Principal Sonnenreich if she would give us a little summary of how she feels about CEPs, mini grants, and 21st Century grants. Have they helped out your school?
Oh, they have helped us enormously. So this was our first year having a mini grant, and it's about $7,700. We use that to establish something called the STEAM team, which consists of 15 fifth graders and one little sister from first grade who's kind of their mascot. And just a couple of months into that program, we were able to compete in the state championship for STEAM teams against the junior highs, which is absolutely phenomenal. It was such a boost to the kids who were participating, to our school community. Other kids were so excited that to see our very small school up there competing at the state level the first time out. And none of that would have been possible without the mini grant. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you on behalf of our STEAM team coordinator and our STEAM team participants, their parents, and the little sister. Thank you all so much. It has been such a boon to our community. I also wanted to share one fact with you. When I was at Hillside for many years and participated, I was the first principal to bring CEP in as a partner. And after about 4 or so years, we had some very good longitudinal data. And as I was trying to figure out what interventions really worked with our kids, was it putting kids with an aid in a rotation? Was it putting kids in a computer lab with adaptive software for a while? What was it that was really moving the needle for kids? I was completely surprised when I realized that the single most effective academic intervention I had was to put a child in after school. So with that, again, thank you so much for your support of my school through CEP, and thank you for that mini grant. It really has been enormously fun and made a huge difference for us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Bueller. I am chair of the CEP today. Tomorrow our board has elections and I might not be the chair anymore. But while I've got a little time left, a couple of things I think the council would be interested in. Number one, Granite does provide us the use of the buildings at no cost, which is really important. This would not exist without Granite's help, but Granite does not do any after-school programs. Without the CEP, there would be no programs like this in West Valley City. The CEP's footprint is much smaller than Granite. It's only within West Valley City. We don't go into Kearns or Magna or anywhere else. It's just within West Valley City. This was a program developed specifically for us. The city council has always funded the program. The funding prior to the recent contract, which increased it to $90,000 annually, was, I think, $35,000. And so that was a significant increase, but not a new program or a new funding. When I joined the board some 10, 12 years ago, Carolyn Burt, who sat on this council, was chairing the board, and she invited me to come. And because she was a longtime city council member and I was new, I thought I ought to go. And then I got stuck there and haven't been able to get out until tomorrow. But I might be reelected tomorrow too, we don't know. And I found out immediately that this is not babysitting. This is academic. This is helping students progress. And I don't know, I don't have access to the data, but the other thing, we do two things as a city for education. One is the CEP. The other is the partnership with the University of Utah. What do we call it? The
Hometown Scholars.
Hometown Scholars, Opportunity Scholars. And I'd be interested to see if those Opportunity Scholars went to after-school programs. I think that would be an interesting data point for the council to see that we are making a difference. We're helping these kids from when they enter school through graduation and into success in their academic and hopefully their work life. So thank you for that minute, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Our board of directors they're so committed. We only have 4 meetings a year and we've had some coming for 10, 12, 15 years. I just wanted to thank you again for your help. You know, $90,000 a year to help kids bring their reading up to competency, their math up to competency is not very much money. We've had $1 million a year for several years. So we're not helping as many kids, but we're doing very targeted projects where the principals participate in the application and I review them, having lots of background in grants, and make sure that they're keeping their agreements and they're getting outcomes that they want and they're writing reports and measuring those outcomes. And if they don't, then they won't get one next year. So we can't do this without the support of West Valley City. I only know 2 other cities that even support after school. Salt Lake City supports after school funding, but those are all operated by Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. And Murray used to have some. I don't know if they do anymore. But one key component of community education partnerships model is we hire staff, teachers, aides at the school who already know the kids. So when the kids sit down there after school, they already know the teachers already know what they need, and they're already off and running. They're already 6 months ahead of Boys and Girls Club people. Nothing wrong with Boys and Girls Club. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, I've got lots of answers.
Any questions for Mrs. Peterson?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We really appreciate you taking your time to come share with us the project and the time and effort you put into it. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our public road presentation by Mr. Pastrick, and he's here in person.
Thank you, Mayor. So several weeks ago, we had a early presentation discussing this issue. And the council asked that we come back with a proposal for an ordinance amendment. And once we've had this conversation, if the council likes the direction, then it would be to then move forward with an ordinance revision. So I'll share with you the proposal here. So first of all, we would create two new public street cross sections, and I'll share details of those. And those street cross sections would only be used in planned unit developments or PUDs where you have attached housing, so townhomes or condos. So those would be the only scenarios where those new street cross sections would be used. As part of this proposal, we would prohibit private streets. The third point I think is important. Currently, the only time you can have under our current ordinance, you can have vehicles backing out onto a street would be for single family or duplexes. So think of a driveway, you can back out of your driveway onto the street. So townhomes right now, the only reason they're able to have driveways is because they've been on private streets. So by having townhomes on a public street, we would need to amend that code to allow them to back out onto the street. Along with, if the council recalls, we in our recent ordinance change, we have a requirement that there be the garage, a driveway, plus additional parking on top of that. And that additional parking tends to be in small pockets just off the street. And so again, if that would allow for those parking areas to back out onto the street as well. And then one thing that would be just an outcome of this is that where we've had a few projects that were private streets and chose to be gated. If it's a public street, that doesn't really allow them to be gated because, well, it's a public street. So just making that point. So here on this next slide shows on the left is our current residential street cross section. So just to review that. So typical street there, you have, it's 29 feet of pavement. You have curb and gutter on both sides, so it's 2.5 feet on each side. Then you have a 5-foot park strip and a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides. So that again is is our standard for residential. And in these two proposed street cross sections, we have two different ones. So the one on the top right would be 41 feet. And again, here in a minute, I'll explain why we're proposing the way, why this is. This would be 26 feet of pavement, curb and gutter, and then a park strip and sidewalk on one side of the street. And then the one at the bottom would be what we're calling a secondary PUD street. So it's essentially the pavement and curb and gutter, and that's it. So to show you or explain why we're proposing this, I'll show you some examples and then we can, of course, field questions. So first of all, why 26 feet of pavement? So right now, as I pointed out, in our standard residential cross section, we have 29 feet of pavement. The difference between a PUD and just our standard residential street is here's a couple of examples. now these are private streets, but it illustrates the point. Because in a townhome development, you have so many driveways, by having a wider pavement section, there's just not as many places to park a vehicle because you can't park in front of a driveway. So if you think about a single family home situation, lots are typically 80 feet wide. You have a 20-foot driveway, and then you've got roughly 60 feet-ish to park vehicles. Here, you can see the driveway spacing is much tighter. So while you could perhaps park a few vehicles, most of the road you would not be able to park on because the driveways are just closer together. So the point being is, by adding more pavement, you're not really gaining that much space for parking because there's so many driveways. So that was the thought behind going to a 26 feet of pavement, is having a wider pavement section doesn't really get you that much more parking because of the driveway spacing. So what we wanted to do next would be to illustrate how, if we adopt these new street cross sections, how those would be employed. So this, what I've done is I have several slides here that show existing developments. Now, these are projects that largely use private streets, but if we were to employ these standards in these developments, how would that look? Okay. So first of all, this project, this is on the corner of 5600 West and 5400 South. The main road that kind of runs through this is actually a public street. So that's the blue line, the 54-foot street cross section. So that is built as a public street, but then the internal streets are all private. So if this were to be built to what we're proposing, the red streets would be that section where you just have the pavement and the curb and gutter. Now, the reason for that is that in this particular project, all of the townhomes are more alley loaded, or the garages are on the backs of the units. So as you look at this slide, you'll see that, for example, here there's sidewalks here, so that it's not that we're saying we don't want sidewalks. It's the sidewalks are actually internal to the development. So the fronts of the units and the sidewalks are kind of internal to the development. So again, if you look at this street here as an example, all the units where the road is are backing onto that street, and then the sidewalks are on the other side of the building. So again, that would be the reason for not having sidewalk on some streets, because of just the way the project is designed. Then you have some others where you would need sidewalk, and that's where you have the green or the 41-foot cross section that would be utilized. So to show you, and then just maybe one other point here, these roads that appear on the north would really not work under this standard because we don't allow essentially dead-end streets like that. So that portion of the project would have to be redesigned in order to meet this new standard, okay? So here's another example. This is another townhome development. Actually, these are two different developments on the south side of this street. So this road here that's east-west running is 3860 South. This is Redwood Road. So again, townhomes all along the south side, and then this is an older development up in the northeast that's a combination of townhomes and condos. So in this case, again, you have sidewalk along the public street, and then all these units are facing in on each other. So you have a sidewalk running down the middle that connects to the public street, or to the sidewalk out on the public street. And then you have this kind of horseshoe street design that provides access to the garages. So again, in that case, that would be the no sidewalk public street, because the sidewalks are internal. Whereas in this development here, called the Gates at Kings Point, if that were to be done as a public street, what they did there is they had sidewalk on one side of the street that's on the inside of that street. So that would all be the 41-foot cross section. So a couple more examples. This is a project that just is wrapping up. This is at Cobalt Landing, also on Redwood Road. So again, most of the streets would be ones without sidewalk, because again, they have all the sidewalks internal to the development within the common area. But then you'd have this one main road connecting out to Redwood that would have sidewalk. And then finally, this project here, this is Majestic Villas. This is 31st South at the top and then 7200 West here along the west side. This one would have to be, really have to be redesigned to make this functional. So as you look at the main road that provides the loop here could have the sidewalk on it and be public. But then they have these little, I'm not sure what you would even call these, but they're kind of a shared driveway, if you will, that really, that's maintained by the HOA. So those would have to go away. And somehow this would have to be redesigned. Because those are, even though they're short, they're still considered private. And so that would have to be reconfigured. So this is just an example of the main streets could be public, but then those ones in between, they would just have to redesign the project because this wouldn't work. So I'll just go back then to just the overall proposal and see if I can answer questions or if you have concerns about the proposal or things you'd like to discuss.
Maybe
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions,
Yes, sir.
Steve. Maybe try to help me understand about this. If people they live in basically kind of like a private street, we to look at. I mean, just to watch a few minutes ago. If they have a problem and they can call police, and can police go into their private street or they cannot go to their private street?
My understanding is they can go to drive on the private streets. I'm not aware of an issue that would prohibit them from like responding to a call at the property.
So they respond, I mean, they respond to call, but they cannot go inside, or they can't go inside.
Inside the development?
Yeah.
Yes, they can go inside.
In fact, one step above that, we're required by state law to respond to those calls for service regardless of where they are. So yes, they can go to those places, those homes or places where the call originates from. Yes.
Interesting, because I have a couple of people, they told me, I mean, in my district, when they have a problem, they call the HOA because they call police, and then so we gotta call the HOA people first before call police.
My guess would be that the HOA is probably advising them of that incorrectly. That would probably be the HOA suggesting that to them. That's not accurate. That may be happening, sir. I'm not sure whether that's happening or not, but not only are we going to go to a call, we're required to by state law, regardless of where it is, if it's in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, the guy, he parked a car in front of the street, I mean, his house, and he had a hard time to move in and out in his driveway. And he talked to that guy, and that guy basically, I think they had an argument, and then basically he tried to call and SOA said, well, you got to talk to us before I call the police. So that's wrong, right? Is that not right?
That's not
okay.
Appropriate.
Even if it's just a parking issue?
Well, so it depends on how they access our services, right? So 911 calls are the required response calls. The non-911 calls that go to our non-emergency line, it depends on how they assess those calls. When you're talking about ordinance enforcement, depending on whether that's on the street or on the home, then no, ordinance enforcement can't go right on in there on the
police
private.
cannot go in there because, maybe that makes sense.
So it's very fact specific.
Yeah.
Specific, fact dependent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that is one problem we have in our, close by ours. We have a PUD. They tow anybody's car that's on the street and they do not keep up anything. So anyway, I saw you motion. Mr. Norfold, what do we can?
Do we have some gated communities in our city that are still nice? I mean, I hate to close the door on close the gate on gated communities. If we have some that are successful, I'm not aware of that, but.
Two that I can think of, I'll let you be the judge of if they're successful. So there's There's the Red Oaks townhomes on Redwood Road at, that's roughly 2,800 south of roughly that area. That's a gated development. There's another one. There's a community directly east of Centennial Park. The larger community is not gated, but there's a smaller development within that is gated. So those are two just off the cuff that I can think of.
Another one on 56th and about 38.
Those.
Yeah, right by Lowe's.
Yes.
Yeah, that one's a senior. Isn't it senior living?
This is on the west side, right?
On the west side of 56.
It's
Oh, I'm thinking east side.
yeah, it's a smaller lot, single family.
Oh,
development.
Madison Place?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got it. I was trying to remember it, but
It's like you know the city.
It's like I've driven past it once or twice. Maybe know somebody that lives in there. Maybe.
I've been to some that, are a reason to limit gated communities, but haven't been to any that are, yeah, we should have gated communities.
Yeah.
What do you think?
yeah, I
I
agree.
don't know these developments.
I know the one on Redwood and 28th. I know Madison Place. And none of them are special
Yeah.
because they're gated. In fact, I think it's a pain
Yeah,
to go visit somebody that are in there.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
Everybody gets things delivered.
I've been to some in Park City that are really nice. But not here in West Valley.
This I'll admit is an area I'm trying to get spun up on, and I know this has been a discussion for the last several weeks in the council. And my one concern, I guess, would be overly restrictive on developers, and I'm curious if you have an opinion on that, if we're implementing policies that are prohibiting developers from coming to our city and building a good product, and going along with the gated community issue, are consumers really seeking those out, or are they just they're purchasing them because that's what's available?
Sure. So on the gated community, we haven't seen a lot of interest in that. Again, there's only a handful in the city. So most developers, even though they do private or propose private streets, haven't asked for gated communities. So I'd say that's more the exception than the rule on private streets. And then as far as impacting development, I have maybe one example I can show you that might help illustrate a point here. So you're familiar with there's a development on 35th South and 5600 West. It's a townhome development. And I'll just explain how this, by changing ordinance, how it would impact this project. So just to orient you here, north is on the right. So 35th South would be here.
don't have a
Share a
picture.
different screen.
Let me,
Thanks, Steve.
you can't see my screen right here.
We're good, but we're not quite
I'll
that
close
good.
our eyes and
Is there a show somewhere you can take your head over? Rubber neck?
That's hopefully better. So 35th South is here on the right. So north is on the right. 5600 West is here at the top. So you may recall on the east side of this development, there are single family detached homes, right? And so in this project, we have both 2-story townhomes and 3-story townhomes. We had the 2-story units be up against the homes and then kind of tapered up or went up to 3 stories. But by allowing these private stub, you could call them private streets or shared driveways along this east side, those are about 100 feet long, okay? What that allows is the units to be sideways against the property. And by doing that, the spacing in between those buildings ends up being roughly the same spacing you would get between homes, okay? Does that make sense? But if by saying that now those have to be public, what a developer would do in that case is with our streets, if you're going to terminate a street, you have to have a cul-de-sac. Well, that would pretty much eat up half of the property all along that side. So what they would do instead is shift the road to the east and put homes facing all along that street, which is allowed. So it's just a different outcome. So in this, by allowing those kind of short shared driveways, you can get a different outcome. Whereas by doing a public street, it pretty much forces the units to be facing or backing that property line. Hopefully that makes sense. And here's just the next thing. I have one more image in this. This just shows you what that looks like. So, and this is one of those things I've debated internally. Is that a street? Well, there's parking in each of those driveways, and it's all made of concrete. There's no curb and gutter, but technically it is a private street.
Yeah. So there's no telling though that public streets would make this an undesirable community. It might make it a better community, not a worse one.
Yeah, and certainly they would, I don't think they would change the product. My only point would be they would have to change the orientation.
Which is what a normal subdivision orientation is.
So less units.
There'd be more units facing people's backyards, because they would have these, either the backs or the fronts along that east side. So, and then the buildings would be about 10 to 15 feet apart. So it'd be just a long row of buildings, whereas here in this scenario, you get the buildings spaced out. And it's the side of the building looking into the yard as opposed to the front of the back.
Yeah, and I would, for a future discussion, like to get rid of PUDs just because ordinance can't go in there. I mean, people are already paying for the services we offer. They're paying their property taxes, they get garbage. Well, that costs them, but garbage, snow removal, ordinance enforcement in case you have a neighbor that's not doing what they should be doing. These people don't have access to that. They're paying for a PUD on top of already paying for what we should be offering them with a public street. And the fact that they're responsible for replacing that street if anything goes wrong, I think is a burden, where they're paying taxes for that to kind of be banked for future maintenance instead of them having to do it themselves. So to me, we're kind of double taxing, double charging fees by allowing the PUDs and then not offering all of our services.
And Mayor, if I can just, so I understand, so is the concern with PUDs just the public street issue, or just PUDs in general?
For PUDs, everything in general.
Okay.
So
That's the whole list, but just for public streets, there's no telling that public streets here would have been a less desirable project.
So I have a question too, so I'm
Okay.
clear. So when you say PUD, I'm wondering if maybe what we're talking about here is HOA. Like, so once we make the streets public, once we say no more private streets,
Mhm.
then really and Steve, you correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been out of the loop for a minute.
Sure.
Really what a PUD process provides outside of an HOA situation is a design. It provides design flexibility. If your concern is the tax discussion you just
Mhm.
had and the provision of services,
Right.
maybe is a good way for me to say it, then I think we're talking about HOAs, not necessarily the PUD process. Does that
Well,
sound
the
right to
PUD
you?
also gives them higher density.
Density, yeah. Well, maybe, depending on how
Depending
they,
on how it goes, yeah.
it gives them design flexibility
Yeah.
and potentially higher density depending. It also, PUDs traditionally have provided us the capability to get more green space in the area in trade-off. You know how, so it really is it's a design guideline. If it's a density issue, we as a council are saying, we're pretty good on our density, our townhomes, and we feel like we're good.
We're there.
Because we've done that, we've had that conversation before. If that's the conversation we're having, then I think we need to have that discussion in the framework of zoning, because that's our strongest place, right? So our strongest our most defensible and strongest ability to control those is at that zoning phase, rather than at these other areas in our code. So that's what I would submit to the council. If I'm hearing the discussion correctly and understanding it, that's where you have to correct me if I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with those sideways, some of those PUDs or examples you showed, some of these roads could be, they're the side of the buildings and they could all be public. I mean, when you gave your presentation before and said we do not inspect those roads, we don't replace those roads, we don't have to go in and do ordinance, those are all the things we didn't have to do, but those are all the things that I think is our job to do. And that's what really got me concerned the most on the public-private street is we don't inspect them and we don't maintain them. And it's a burden on the people that live there. So I would rather have public streets everywhere. And then.
One point I would make, if I may, is, so again, with public streets, certainly we can do that. If you have a townhome development where it's all public streets, there is still a need for a homeowner association for a handful of reasons. So one would be that the common area, like the landscaping, would still be maintained in common.
Correct.
And then you also have, for example, just the buildings themselves are maintained by the HOA. So just to clarify,
Right.
so there's still a need for an HOA, they would have less responsibility.
Right, they wouldn't be responsible for replacing the sewer, the road. They wouldn't have this need for a $500,000 reserve fund to be able to do all the stuff that they're responsible for. And we all know associations, very few are funded well.
Right, sorry, but sometimes the HOA, they had a problem with the mismanagement and stuff and have to residents or people have to do it their own, and that's just sad to see that. This I saw that. So I want to go back to the bar parking again. Okay. Inside the PUD, you have parking problem. You call the police. Basically, you have to take care along with the HOA.
Right.
But the public street, you call police, and police maybe come and give you a ticket or whatever, can solve a problem, correct?
Yeah, and our parking
Right.
enforcement officers would drive those streets and do
Uh-huh.
parking enforcement.
But-
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
They'd be treated like everybody else.
But he brought it up and I just misunderstood. Yeah.
To go along with the mayor's comment, if I can, kind of an adjacent conversation is flag lots. My house is surrounded, someday it'll be surrounded by flag lots. It has a flag lot on one side, services two houses. My neighbor next door is on an acre. I'm sure eventually that's gonna have a flag lot. And I'm okay with flag lots until they're servicing more than two houses. My concern is, okay, my neighbor's next door, there's two houses, they have a sewer issue in the lane. Maybe both have sewer issues in the lane, both service lines sink. One can afford to replace it, the other one can't, and it just becomes a nightmare. I can see, and just maintenance of the asphalt. Our asphalt, and I say our, but it's my neighbor's lane, has settled at a couple spots, and I just have concerns with that. And then if you multiply that by other houses being serviced, it just really muddies the maintenance on those. And so tonight in regular meeting, we're approving or not a development that is, I think there's 7 or 8 lots that are serviced by basically a flag lot. And so I have concerns with that.
Was it really 7 or just 4?
I don't recall. Steve,
Okay,
when you
I'll
were
look.
looking at it, so-
Yeah.
Councilman Whitstone?
Yeah, just one comment on what you mentioned about being double charged for things. I would agree with your comment. Just, I started my little family out at the Balmoral Townhomes on 56 and 31, and our funds were mismanaged by an HOA, and we lost over $100,000 in our fund. And just being an advocate for lower income, most people that live there, and I certainly fell into that category. We were just starting out in life, and you're typically a lower income family and you're being double charged for services that an upper income or middle income family would be paying for. So just another in support of what you just mentioned.
I want to understand about the code enforcement there. So if they have a problem inside the PUD and code enforcement, can I go inside?
Cannot.
So
All
they have to turn-
private.
So that turn over to the HOA
Mhm.
again.
Yep, and either they do a good job and maintain or they don't.
Oh,
Did you saw
It's
something
four
else?
lots.
Four
It's
lots,
Four
okay.
lots, and then the two in front are gonna be serviced by the
The main road.
so.
Yeah. I didn't think it was 7, but I've been wrong before.
And that one I think is a subdivision application, so it's administrative.
So that means that we really, if we deny it, we open ourselves up for litigation. That we'll probably lose.
Then why bring it to us?
Yeah,
That's a
we've
good-
had this
that's a good
conversation.
Because I'm gonna vote, any vote, I'm gonna vote how I feel.
Yeah,
And
that's
so bring it.
why they bring it to litigation to us? Because they already, we got approve everything or what?
Yeah, so state law, under the subdivision section of state law, subdivisions are administrative, which means as long as they have checked off the boxes required, they are approved. As Councilman Nordfelt mentioned, we as staff have recommended to the council or have brought to the council's attention the very question that you have asked. And the last conversation was maybe a year or two ago. And the council's desire was to still see those, regardless of the fact that there is no legal basis for voting against those if they meet all of the requirements, which we don't put them on your agenda until they meet all of the requirements.
We can vote in some, we approve the project with contingency, certain thing, for example, like public road instead of private road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those had already been through that process. So these are applications that have been made long ago that are just now getting to the subdivision process.
This
So
one-
yes, prior to that, oh, I'm sorry, Nicole.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This one was approved in December of 2021, just as an FYI.
Yeah,
The council
so,
approved it.
so those prior land use decisions, you do have different standards to go by from a legal perspective. Once you get to the administrative subdivision process, it's a different process.
So we have a lot of authority when it comes to a zone change application.
Right.
And at that point is when we put the restrictions
Well, not-
onto the development, but after we've passed that, if they meet our ordinances, there's really not much.
And that's state law, that's not city code.
That's what
Yes,
we
sir.
talked about last week with the one, but it was really a zoning thing. Their concept could have been, they could end up building something completely different than the concept, as long as it fits within the density that we require and our
And
development
and the
agreement.
development agreement.
But beyond that, our hands are tied apparently, and we,
Well, and we may need to change it so that the subdivision plat approval is before we even zone change it because they have all the engineering, they don't want to do that ahead of time.
And
No.
state law doesn't allow for that. So state
Yeah.
law sets forth how the process works. And that's why I said before, and as you are aware, your strength, the greatest strength you have to make decisions and direct that is at that legislative zoning level. And all of the things that we want as a city council we need to be adjusting our ordinances or having those requirements in our ordinances at that level, not once we get to the administrative level.
so taking last week as homework, could we have, if they brought us a concept plan that we all liked, could we tie that concept plan to say it needs to be substantially like this, or you have to come back to us? If you're gonna change it substantially, and what is substantially,
Yep.
from
Yep.
that concept plan?
Yep, and we've done that. We've done that by development agreement. We've attached those plans and said that very thing. I will give a little bit of caution and infuse a little bit of reality to that process because that's a little bit the place where we were with Jordan River Marketplace. So it's different and the same in that there's still that subjective decision of what's substantially different. We think as staff, we can make that decision for you and bring it back to you as council and set those parameters. And we have done that before. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we have to be really careful about that and make sure that words say exactly what we mean in those development agreements, which I will say our staff and attorneys are very good at. We've been doing development agreements in the zone framework for a long time, but I do really think that it's important for you as a council, if there are things that are from a zoning perspective giving you concern, we need to have a discussion about those, and we need to change those things at the zoning level, not by 1,000 cuts after that, and certainly not at the administrative level, because like you guys have your litigation discussion and you know what those costs look like. We haven't had a land use case in a long time, but those are the worst of all. And so we work really hard to make sure we're playing by the rules, but to give you as much power and control as we can at that level where you have all the authority and discretion you need at that legislative level.
So last week in regular meeting, a neighbor came and was really upset because there was another concept plan that the council had benefit of, but didn't go through planning commission. They had no idea about it. And so a light bulb went off, man, it could be any concept plan, and so I think we need to think about that a little bit of if we approve a zoning change and we all assume that it's gonna look like this, Kauai is gonna connect or it's not gonna connect, and then it gets to the end and it connects or it doesn't connect, and the neighbors are going, what good are you guys, you're supposed to, so just a thought.
Yeah, and we can do all of that at the zoning level.
So if there's
anything by
anything
motion.
that we like about the concept plan, if it's not in the development agreement, we need to get it in.
Yeah.
So that they are tied to that.
Yeah, and that's why I would like in the future that all of our questions are answered, all of our concerns before we go to regular meeting, even if that adds a week or two to their process. If we understand it and we're not rushing to do it, and we can continue it a week if we have questions, if everything's not in that development agreement, I would much rather have it all written out and plain and simple before we get in there and make adjustments to it. So that everybody understands what it is before we walk in, and they can either vote yes or no, and the developer knows what we're doing without a last minute wrench in his project, so.
Yeah, and last week, I felt like the developer was willing to negotiate with us, and we just kind of stopped it. And it would be nice to have that buffer time to negotiate and come up with something that we all can agree on that's beneficial for all of us.
Well, and I may be recollecting wrong, but I thought last year we decided we were gonna look at these and then have 2 weeks before they were really on our regular meeting so that we had time to go over the development agreements again. I thought we were going to give ourselves more time, but that never really came to play.
We sure can, so 2 things at play. I think your advice to the council is so wise, and we've been at this together a long time. We don't want to ever have those negotiation discussions in a council meeting. It never goes well.
Right.
To add a week or two to the process, I think is totally doable. There are state law requirements, as you guys know, which we never even bump up
I was gonna
close
say,
to.
we don't get close
Like
to
we
them.
never do, but we have to recognize that those do exist. We really truly don't ever even, we're never even close to those. But in a difficult case, we could get there. And certainly what you will see as council from here on out and what we've been seeing are difficult land use questions and difficult land use decisions. And so certainly we could build some extra time into the process. And certainly staff, of course, would like to help the developer along to what the council wants to see. Steve made a great comment in my office, and I know it's true that what the developers often first bring in across the table to the staff, Steve can pretty much bet a donut or two that they would never, first of all, we would never even let them get to your agenda, but it's really great to be able to have that discussion and have some of what the council desires interpreted by your staff so that the developers know what to bring back. And that interplay is really important. And frankly, the developers appreciate that as well. To Councilman Nordfeld's point, they really like to just be able to work on it if there needs to work on. So if you'd like, we can add, should we start with a week or do you think 2 weeks?
I think an extra week in between would be nice,
Okay.
just to try.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
So we would study it 1 week and then it would be on the regular 2 weeks later.
right. Yeah. And maybe have it on the study as a communication the second week.
Right.
Yeah,
Just so we
I
can,
like that.
If there's a
anything else to talk
change,
about.
maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So maybe it would be on study twice if we need to make a change.
Yeah, right.
Got it.
I think that's great.
Mayor,
yes,
sometimes the developer does that too. That first item that was on our study meeting agenda tonight was pulled by the developer for a couple of weeks for whatever reason. So, as we work together, I think we can come up with some better ideas that won't end up being voted out in regular meeting.
right. Very good point. Thank you.
And if there's just one or two items that we don't like about a development, we can, even in the regular meeting, we can have a vote to continue it for a week or two. And then give the developer an opportunity to meet what we really want.
And there's a couple of examples of what Nicole brought up. I mean, not too long ago, the council changed the parking requirements, right? And prior to that, we were negotiating every development on parking. And now this is another example where here again, by changing the code now, then it sets the expectation and there's no negotiation after that.
Makes us very powerful from that perspective, as I mentioned, and legally defensible, which is really, because
That's how it
staff, our
is.
goal. Yeah, and we want you to always be able to say no, and we can defend you, or say yes, and we can defend you. And that, at that stage in the game, we will never lose.
Okay. So for myself personally, on the public streets, I would rather just have our public streets be one uniform, whether it's a neighborhood, townhouse, PUD, HOA, just one standard, the 54. And I think they can design their developments around that. I think they're pretty creative. I had one developer actually say, well, it'll save some PUD costs to the residents and probably help out my development. Exact words. I'm like, well, good. Okay, redesign that sucker. So.
Steve, how many places can they put townhomes in right now in our city? What's the requirement for that?
So they need RM zoning, and we really don't have any RM zoning that doesn't have a development agreement where someone's come in and asked for a rezone. So really, as we look at new townhome developments, we're looking at a rezone for those where they would come in and we would end up having a development agreement.
But our ordinances right now say that any rezoning for residents has to be RE zone, except when they are next to another RM zone and
Right.
on a large right of way.
Exactly. So there are a number of criteria. One would be, as you pointed out, has access and frontage on a major street like Redwood or 35th. We also have a provision that says if you're within, I believe it's half mile of a track station, that's another criteria. If they don't meet the criteria, then they're just not eligible to apply for RM zoning. So, but with that, there are still a number of properties that could apply. It's just, so it's hard to know how many might actually come in based on that.
They can apply, it doesn't mean that we still want townhomes on that property.
Exactly.
That's right.
So we don't have to rezone it
No.
to that if we don't want it. If we think we're townhomed out, yeah. Are there,
But
you
if
can't
there-
think of any entitled property for RM right now?
So we do have projects the council has approved, they just haven't built yet. So
Okay.
as an example, right next to Redwood Road on Red Oaks, there was a small, like 24 unit project. There was the one, Councilman Army mentioned 3200 West and just south of 35th South that was approved recently. There's others as well, but those are ones that come just off the top of my head.
Thank you.
I think though, if we do allow for another townhome or condo development at, maybe something close to tracks, that I think that the two new public street cross sections that you're proposing would be okay. So I guess I disagree with the mayor on that.
And I'll take the middle of the road.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But I prefer the 29-foot pavement, and then I'm okay with sidewalk or just curb and gutter, depending on it's in a garage, kind of alleyway, garage type situation.
Yeah, same thing. I think I would be okay with that in certain circumstances, but I think a second option would at least be.
So we know what to come back with. How are we looking?
That's what I'm
I missed
asking.
the
Do you
little
know?
count.
Because there was not a.
I know we're prohibiting private streets. I'm clear on that. And I think we're on the third point. I think we're okay there again to allow parking to back out on to the street in these situations. The area I'm not sure there's consensus on would be the cross section.
So I'm trying to understand what you're proposing, Scott.
So every street would be 29 feet wide pavement, whereas some of these are 26. So just keep everything 29 feet between the curbs. The difference would be when you're in an alleyway where there's a rear load garage, that you don't need sidewalk.
Okay.
So it would just be curb.
So
it'll be just the
So
29 feet.
29
this
feet.
bottom right would be okay as long as it went 29.
29.
Instead of 26.
And
I
if
could
it-
live with
And if
that.
a developer wants to do sidewalk, if it makes sense, then the cross section above would still be okay as long as there's 29 between the curbs. I just think for garbage, snowplow, big vehicles, I just think 29 is, it's nicer. And there may be some cases where they can park on the road. I mean, you mentioned that driveways are gonna be close together where they wouldn't, but there might be some, and so I just think let's standardize it.
So we allow 29 feet today
Yes.
in a residential street. And that allows for some parking. But if there's driveways all along, I don't know, we need the 29.
I'll let you borrow my truck for a week. Then you'll realize you do need the 29. It's 27 feet long,
But how wide is it?
8 feet, just like a normal truck. I mean, just a normal vehicle. But when you have a 4-door long bed,
When I remember Mayor Bigelow talking about backing his.
I'll borrow your
trailer.
truck for a week.
I'll borrow it.
I'll take that option.
yeah, I'm gonna give you the
Is there a limit
2,000.
on the miles? or-
No, you can take the 2,000. It has a really horrible turn radius. It wouldn't even get in and out of these driveways. The newer
Sorry
ones
to
do.
interrupt you.
No, you're fine, yeah.
Yes.
This has been a fun council meeting, but I remember Mayor Bigelow talking about a trailer, backing a trailer in and out and stuff, and so to have an extra couple feet can make a difference, so. Yeah, I'm spoiled. I probably have like a 32-foot or 35-foot road in front of my house, and so I'm spoiled, but I think everybody should be.
I thought it may be bigger. I mean, some street really lost. I thought maybe more than 29, but normally it's 29 feet. Is that right, Steve?
All of our residential,
Most of our residential streets are actually 25 feet of pavement. We changed, as a city, we changed that, I'm not sure how many years ago, to 29. But under the county, which, half the city was built when we incorporated, the standard was 25 feet of pavement.
okay. So can everybody agree on 29 pavement and then have the two options of one sidewalk or no sidewalk?
Sure, I go with the.
All right,
The
we
big
got
district,
four for that. Okay, so council, just so I'm also clear, what Steve's gonna do is draft up that ordinance and we're gonna proceed to planning commission with that, not bring it back to you for review until it gets to you for review, since it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yep,
I'm
okay,
good.
very good,
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
very good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for all your hard work, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
It does go noticed. I do appreciate it. All right, budget product or program mods. Ms. Cottle, did you have anything?
Okay, no, ma'am, just, that was just, Wayne keeping that on the agenda as he mentioned.
Okay.
As you saw from the email he sent, I believe on the 17th of April. Sorry, the 19th of April. Let's see, I think it is the 17th. That was kind of the last rundown for him and he had those 3 remaining questions. Just if anyone had any response back on that before he brings the tentative budget to you as a council next week. So really no presentation and I can maybe answer some questions if someone had those, but the email that he sent was the last correspondence and those 3 discussion items.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Is this the email on the 14th?
Let me just get myself straight
Yeah.
here, sir. Okay, so the email is April 14th. Yes, I
Yeah.
apologize. Thursday, April 14th, and it's titled Balanced Budget Rough Draft.
Should say version 26.
Had a ton of questions and mostly rookie questions. So I don't know if it has to be in a public meeting, but I did request time with Wayne to
Okay, yeah.
just go over those so I don't take up time here, but they're pretty questions. So
Be great.
So do you want to give us a summary at the end? Your question, the answer. So if anybody else had it, it's just done.
yeah, we can do that.
At the very end, just write us a little TD.
As long as they're not embarrassing questions, I'll bring them
No,
up.
there's no
I'm sure
bad
you'll-
budget questions, that's for
I was
sure.
gonna say there are no bad questions. Okay, seeing no other comments, you're gonna have to tell me when a hand raises because I forget to look up there, please.
Good.
Thank you. All right, council calendar. Did anybody have any questions on the calendar? So we have a new performance starting, so lots of fun stuff to go do. Okay, seeing no comments or questions there. Potential future agenda items.
I don't know if it's a new item, but last week we talked that I think you're gonna send us the KPIs back so that we can.
Oh, yeah, can you send them to me so we can,
so we can-
okay,
I can email those to you.
okay, then we can look at those. Thank you for following up on that. That was it?
So we're gonna do that a week from today or?
She's
Well,
gonna-
yeah,
She's gonna email it to us and then, yeah, maybe we schedule a time sometime next month to narrow it down a little bit.
give
Make sure we don't have
direction,
duplicates.
yeah,
It's kind of the.
make sure it's not already covered in the KPIs in the budget, so. Yep, just double check everything. Okay, no other future agenda? Do we have any council reports?
One more item, sorry,
Oh,
Mayor.
sorry.
Just,
Okay,
one of the email, actually, one of the email, when sent it out, the memorandum right here. Also, I don't know, Will and Scott, how much more information you want to know about arena right here at Mavis Center? Because right here, you can take a look at subsidized and or you want more information before make decision or what you want to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
did you guys want to schedule it as a
I think.
communication item or,
Let's schedule it for a study meeting.
okay? You're
Or
Jewish,
not just the arena, I think all of it, you know.
just the,
And is that as a discussion item, sir, or would you like presentation?
yeah, do you want a presentation or just discussion?
I think if you attach this, we can just
just talk about that?
Okay, great.
Nobody needs to do homework before.
Oh, well, only to be ready for our questions, but that can always wait a week.
Okay,
Okay. That's all I have.
okay. Council reports. I went to the Easter egg hunt Saturday morning. Well, I went to the hockey game Friday night for my hometown. That was very well attended. I did well there. And then the Easter egg hunt Saturday morning, and Nancy said it was very successful. That candy was cleaned up in 10 minutes at the tops. Those kids had a job and they did it well. So thank you to your department for putting that on, Nancy. That was very, very nice.
So Mayor, you saying the people buy tickets and go to the game and we had a big crowd there?
They didn't, yeah, they gave out vouchers. And there was a
vouchers.
really big crowd.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Vouch.
I thought it was well attended.
Oh, yeah, very
Yeah.
well attended. I think
Yeah.
the total attendance was 7,500, and of that, I think it was about 1,000 were my hometown voucher
Yeah, it's
holders.
our business sent out a letter and says they have about 2,500 free tickets. So yeah, so maybe that.
So good.
I'll just mention, I went on the domestic violence awareness ride that ended at the arena and met some, I don't know if Chief Jacobs is online, but I met some great motor patrol officers, which were great to chat with. And I missed, I think Jake spoke, but I missed his remarks. It was a good event. A lot of motorcycles. Wow.
Good. Glad to hear that was a good event. All right, we'll now move on to a review of the special municipal building authority meeting scheduled for, today's not that day, next week, April 26th. Every once in a while, we've put it on the same day, so that kind of scared me.
Yeah, I actually did the same thing. Nicole had to remind me. So this is just the corresponding meeting for the bonds.
Right. Yeah. Does anybody need any more information? It's the same presentation. Okay. Do we have a need for a closed session?
Not today, ma'am.
All right. One last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Ms. Kamic,
Yes.
I will be a few minutes late for the regular meeting, but I will be there.
Perfect. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.